Hello and welcome back to Imagination Mansion. Today I thought I'd go through the books that I want to read, the books that I'm reading, and the books that I have read sort of in the month of August. Disclaimer, I also realised why I was such a mess over summer. Because it was summer. Because I was hot and sweaty and I couldn't think, and I probably have some form of that seasonal affective disorder that most people get in the winter. I probably get that in the summer because every summer, without fail, I can't think. I'm over emotional for no reason. I just can't sleep properly. I'm tired all the time. I'm uncomfortable. I'm grumpy. I'm just not a nice person in summer. I'm affable, I'll still be polite to people, I'll not make it anyone else's problem, but I don't have a good time. And so I was literally I feel like making a video, and I was literally it's because it's cold, isn't it? It's because it's gotten cold. Every year I'm why can't I sit down and think in the middle of July? And it's because it's the middle of July. It's because I'm melting. So, with that out of the way, let's get into the books that I read in August. So, first up is one that you saw in my previous video, which is Warrior Queens and Quiet Revolutionaries by Kate Moss. Really enjoyed this one. It was very interesting to see how she put in basically lists of names while expanding on a few that she could find the most information on. And then also how she was at the same time kind of researching her own family tree, because she's researching this woman called Lily, who's her great-grandmother, and it is just a very interesting book. It's very well read, which I kind of expected, as Kate Moss's books, though long, are usually quite highly regarded. So that's that one. And next up is The Night and Its Moon by Piper CJ. So I went into this with no expectations because I think that's just the safest way to read. I knew a lot of people were talking about it and I knew a lot of people liked it, but I was I'm just gonna go in with nothing, and I loved it. It was so good. I loved the version of the world building they did. I loved the world itself. I loved the characters. I loved the kind of dichotomy of the two, because there's two sort of timelines that we get, and they were beautifully done, and I loved how they kind of mirrored each other in the way that they were dealing with things, and this sort of two characters trying to find each other. I loved it. I even loved the cliffhanger at the end, because I kind of knew it was coming, because it's a trilogy, so, they had to continue the story somehow. But yeah, loved it. 5 out of 5. So, next up is another non-fiction, which is The Mystery of the Hanging Garden of Babylon by Stephanie Dalley. And this one was another one I loved. I loved how they only gave information that was necessary. It's not a very big book, and they didn't need to go into too much detail. You don't need to know all the Babylonian kings and all the Assyrian kings, and you just need to know the ones that are relevant. There are some mentions of other people, just simply when they're going through how things may have gotten confused, because the classics, so the Greeks and Romans, kind of thought one thing, because they did make it a wonder of the world, and so they were okay, so they've got this idea of it. Where is this idea come from? Because it doesn't match the archaeological evidence, and kind of coming up with where things have gotten confused. Maybe there's translation errors and all that kind of stuff. But it was very well done, and like I said, not too bogged down in unnecessary facts. She writes in a very clear, understanding way, and I found it very interesting. So there's that one. So the next one I read in one night. I didn't mean to, it just kind of happened. And that was Artemis by Andy Weir. I loved this book. As you can tell from the fact I finished it in one night. So it's a sci-fi, as you can tell. There's a space lady on the front, and it literally says "Welcome to the Moon." So it's a story about this space moon base called Artemis, and sort of like the community that lives there, especially the main character, Jazz. And it's so interesting the way that it's just sort of like this pocket of society that tries to run itself almost, and you find all these like, you know, like back alley deals and all this kind of shady stuff going on in the background, and it's just so interesting, and I loved the characters, and it was just so fascinating how no one was wholly good and no one was wholly like bad, as society just is most of the time. And yeah, I just loved it. So that's that one. So this is A Touch of Darkness by Scarlett St. Clair. I enjoyed this. I think not quite as much as A Night in Its Moon, but I did enjoy this. I loved the idea behind New Athens and the gods kind of like coming down and kind of like just having their own businesses. It was a very, very interesting take on it. It's also a very interesting take on both Hades and Persephone as separate people, and the way that the divine can be seen and the way they disguise themselves, and the way they did Demeter and Persephone's relationship, and she has the best friend in the world, and I wish I had her best friend as well as my own, of course. But yeah, there's some horrible people in this book, and it's one of those things where it's just like, oh, it's good. Like, it is spicy, I will say that, especially like second half of the book. But I didn't have a problem with that. Like, I don't go out seeking it, but I'm also not squeamish of it as well. So, I don't know if I'm gonna read the sequel, because the way that it finishes is quite satisfying, but I probably will, even just to see what happens. But yeah, there's that one. And another one that I would have finished in one night, but Kenneth told me to go to bed, which is 4 Seasons in Japan by Nick Bradley. This tugged at my heartstrings, and it was so sweet. Not in like a saccharine sweet way, it was like realistic, and it's just people trying to do better but not knowing how to, and the sort of like you can tell that everyone's trying their best, and I love it when other characters can like tell that, like, because it's just good. Because it's the story of a translator who's having a rough time in Japan. She's just having like relationship problems, and you know, she's just stuck for ideas, and then suddenly she finds this book, and without thinking about it, she just starts translating it because she's obsessed with it. And so it has her story as she kind of like her translating story, and also trying to find the author of this book that she's found, while also including the translated text itself. And I loved both, but I think I preferred the translated text, just simply because it's more fleshed out and there's more of it, like it's more prominent in the book than her story is. But it was because the translated story is like the story of like a city kid who goes to live with his bumpkin grandma, and the sort of like the clashes that they have, and the reconciliation, and how they sort of like, he grows as a person and so does she, and all this kind of stuff. And it's just very good. And so I will probably buy his debut because this was so good. So, after that, I will go through I say go through, there's literally 2 books. I will show you the 2 books that I am currently reading. First up is a non-fiction, and it is Professor Alice Roberts' Ancestors, The Prehistory of Britain in 7 Burials. So I am about halfway through the first one, so I can't give too much of a review, but I enjoy her writing style, I enjoy the topic, and it's good so far. Like I said, I'm literally like that far in, so can't say too much about it. And then next up, I am reading, so the other one I'm reading is a light novel, and that is Sword Art Online, specifically Aincrad. So I know that Sword Art Online's a bit of a Marmite series, but I watched the anime, loved it, and so I'm quite enjoying reading sort of like, yeah, it literally says on the back, read the novel that ignited the phenomenon, and I'm loving it so far. Interesting that it moves a lot faster than the anime, at least so far, because like I said, I'm that far in. But yeah, enjoying it so far. So that's what I'm reading at the moment. And now I just have 4 books that I am planning to read in September. I will probably read more than this, but you know, start small. So, first up, we have The Sun and Its Shade by Piper C.J. So this is the sequel to The Night and Its Moon, and so I will definitely be reading this because I want to know what happens. Because I love the story and I love the characters so far, and I want to see what she does with them. So there's that one. Next up is a graphic novel, which is by Rainbow Rowell and Faith Erin Hicks, which is Pumpkinheads, because we are getting into the colder seasons. We're not quite in spooky season yet, at least not, you know, technically, but like, we are in my heart, so I thought this felt appropriate, and I've had a flick through and it seems very, very sweet. So it's not spooky, but it's just autumnal. So there's that. Next up is one I started reading on the train a bit ago and then stopped because we had to get off the train. And then it's been so long that I've kind of forgot what I read, so I will be rereading it, and that is The Year in Space by the Supermassive Podcast, which is by the Royal Astronomical Society. So I love this podcast, and as soon as I found out that they wrote a book, I did go out and grab it. I got this quite a bit ago, to be fair, but I remember enjoying what I read, but like I said, I can't quite remember what it was, so I will be starting from the beginning, but that is that one. And lastly, I've got Masters of Death by Olivia Blake, which is this one, and it's got little skulls on the side as well, because I got the fancy edition. And I also love the art inside. I love it how they've started doing this now in books. It makes me so happy. So this book is literally about, the top literally says, a ghost-infested mansion, a small group of supernatural beings, and an unlikely quest. And I'm like, that sounds right up my alley. I will be reading this. I think this will probably be the last one I read, just as we're getting a bit closer to the spooky season. But yeah. Like I said, with all of these, I'm going in blind, just so I can actually like experience the book without thinking, oh god, I've got to really like it, or oh god, everyone thinks it's awful, I will too. You know, so I just like to not go in with any expectations whatsoever, because that's that just stresses me out, honestly. Whereas I know some people love reading reviews before they do something, so it's whatever's comfortable for you. But yeah, that is the books I've read, that is the books I am reading, and that is the books I want to read. I will probably do another video about kind of like more autumnal going into spooky books. Not sure, because I did do one last year, but I do think I want to do, instead of, because I did like 2 massive videos last year, like I think they were stupidly long, they were like over half an hour long each, so I think I might break them up. I'm not sure how, I'm not sure like sort of like what I'll do, but we'll see. I'll figure something out. Like I said at the start of the video, I have some brain power left, which is fantastic. It's also fantastic for my co-workers because I'm a little bit more helpful now. Not that I wasn't before, but I can think a bit clearer now. You know, I don't stand in the middle of the store every now and again because there's like a rush of a heat wave just with the dial-up tone going off in my head. Because yes, I do remember dial-up and it was so loud. Anyway, that is it for this video. Give it a thumbs up if you liked it and leave a comment. What are you reading at the moment? Is there anything you're planning on reading as we're building up to like autumn spooky month? Or are you just gonna pick up whatever you feel like, which is also completely valid, and I will probably have some of those mixed in there. And subscribe, because like I said, I actually have brain power, and so I do plan on making a few more videos, especially as this is kind of like my season. I do like the spooky autumnal sort of like wistful weather. I'm a very cozy person, and so like I literally read the Hygge books and I was like, I want this all year round. Like I just want Hygge all the time. So that explains me as a person. But yeah, I will see you guys next time. Bye bye.